guys and gals, Shane Stevenson here at the Buffalo Naval Park, and for today's video it's a PowerPoint, but we're very proud of the fact that we are the last Talos missile ship in the world, and we are going to be talking about Operation Bumblebee and the growth of this big missile behind me and the two other T's of the program, the Tartar and the Terrier. So follow me, and I hope you enjoy. Okay, the three T's of U.S. Navy's first guided missile systems, and this was an exciting video. I did a lot of research for this, and I'll put some sources at the very end for you. All right, so the beginnings of Operation Bumblebee come from this quote. All right, according to recognized aerotechnical tests, the Bumblebee cannot fly because of the shape and weight of its body in relation to the total wing area. But the Bumblebee does not know this, so he goes ahead and flies anyway. So this quote, which hung in the Office of Scientific Research and Development at the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins University, became the inspiration for Operation Bumblebee, hence its name. Operation Bumblebee was tasked with the development of a beam-riding missile powered by a ramjet engine to solve the problems associated with the gap in mid-range anti-aircraft defense. At the time of initial investigation, certainly we had CAP, 150, 200 miles out from the fleet, and we had short-range anti-aircraft platforms on board, but we didn't have that mid-range. So it was important, especially as the changes in technology to other foreign armies and navies, to have that mid-range area between the CAP and the short-range weaponry that we would have on board. And at the end of the day, all the three T's were superseded by the RIM 66 and 67 Standard Missile by the time the early 80s come around. So the goal of these beam-riding ramjet engine missiles was to enable radar to track targets, and then when these targets were within the engagement range, information was designated to the fire control radar and the computers that acquired and tracked the target. All right, and that included range, elevation, and bearing. All right, one of the problems that they had to try and solve was what's called the multipath phenomenon. All right, so if missiles or threats were coming in low to the water, what would happen is the beam, the radar, if that was too close to the water, it would begin to skip and bounce off the water and reflect back out, which then jumbled the accuracy of the radar used aboard ship. All right, so then these missiles had become equipped with semi-active homing systems just in case that occurred for low-flying threats along the water. And initially, this was envisioned, especially with the Tartar and the Terrier, to just full-on replace the 5-inch 54 Mark 42 gun on board ships. So you really can't talk about the three T's, Talos, Terrier, and Tartar, without talking about the launchers. All right, you when you're developing a new system completely, what you need to do is you need to develop a launcher that has both training and elevation technology. It has the ability to hold and support the missiles either singly, like we'd call one-armed bandits, or twin arms. It has to have the ability to exchange information into the missile itself before launching or firing. And it has to be a system that can actually fire the missiles, that can provide enough safety for the ship itself, for the missile, and also the crew. So here's some examples for the three T's that we're talking about. All right, you'll see the Talos, Tartar, and Terrier launchers. So how would one describe a launcher? All right, they can be known by how many arms they have, twin or single. All right, if the system is vertical loading or horizontal loading, all right, you can explain a launcher through that system. And the distance traveled on the launcher, whether it's a zero length or a rail type launcher. Technically, Talos is a rail type launcher, but it only launches 2 to 5 inches, I think. At least that's what I've read. 2 to 5 inches before it disengages from the launcher rail and then goes off ship. So it's also known as a zero length launcher because it's only a couple of inches. You're not going multiple feet as it's coming off the launcher. So when you're describing launchers, you could say, oh, is it a zero length, meaning it disengages from the launcher immediately and takes off? Or is it a rail type where it runs along the rail and then disengages as it reaches the end of the rail? So a little of the loading systems here. I love that shot of the Talos taking off there. Talos, there's the missile house on the right. So if you've seen our plethora of videos, and even other people love to come and look at our missile house and they film their own videos. We had a horizontal loading system, right? Stowage in the magazine was horizontal to the deck. Then the assembly, the mating area, then the wing and fin area, right out to the launcher. Everything was done horizontally. For the Terrier, they had both a vertical and horizontal loading system. In the upper right, what you'll see is the loading system for the Terriers that were on the 2 heavy cruisers, all right, USS Boston and USS Canberra. For every other system that used a Terrier, whether it's cruisers or destroyers, they used a vertical loading system that you'll see down in the center right there. All right, so they were loaded horizontally, but then you had an arm that came up, which then loaded it right onto the launcher. So vertical for Boston and Canberra, heavy cruisers, a lot larger. Some of the newer cruisers for this time period, the Leahy class, and the CLG class, the Providence class, they would have used the horizontal loading with that arm that can raise and slide right onto the launcher. For the Tartar, they used exclusively the vertical loading system. So a little bit about each of the missiles now. All right, Talos was the largest of the 3 Ts. The original goal was to intercept a target 10 miles out with a ceiling of about 30,000 feet. Eventual modifications to the Talos saw about 130 miles, extending out that range and up to an 80,000 foot ceiling. So these were first developed and tested in 1952. Airframe construction was at McDonnell Aircraft in St. Louis, and final assembly was at the Bendix Corporation in Mishawaka, Indiana. Say that 5 times. Throughout the course of its life, it had 8 modifications. And again, that extended from the 10 miles of the original out to that 120, 130 mile, and the growth of the ceiling as well. So the Little Rock carried the RIM 8B, which was the first tactical nuclear Talos. Other modifications through these 8 had extended missile ranges and height, as I'd mentioned, the creation of a surface-to-surface package, not just surface-to-air, and an anti-radiation package as well. These were the ships that carried the Talos. We have the 3 Galveston class, of which we're proud to say USS Little Rock is one. That's the Galveston, Little Rock, and Oklahoma City, CLG 3, 4, and 5. The three Albany classes, Albany, Chicago, and Columbus, and the first nuclear cruiser, sorry, I almost said carrier, the first nuclear cruiser, the USS Long Beach. Here's some great shots. On the right, testing the missiles, maybe at a testing site. In the middle there is a great shot of the USS Albany. To the right, import of USS Little Rock. And then, of course, a famous shot very early on of the USS Little Rock firing one of the Talos missiles. All right, and you can tell that's very early on because if you can see that diamond-shaped radar, all right, the SPS-2, all right, that was on the USS Little Rock for only about 2 years of her service. So this photo is from prior 1963. After that time, they had the SPS-30, which is the big black dish that we still have today. Only 2 ships carried that SPS-2. I believe that's the name of the radar. SPS-2, the Northampton, and the USS Little Rock. And here's CLG-3, the Galveston on the left, and CLG-5, the USS Okie City on the right. Because the Talos system was so large and heavy, she needed a wide berth and a lot of space for storage. She used the Mark 7 twin arm launcher, right? And destroyers and frigates were excluded because the launching and spacing needs. Right, if you can imagine if you've been here and you see our missile house, can you imagine that sitting on a destroyer or a frigate? No. So therefore, the Terrier and the Tartar system was born out of the need for a similar system, similar principles, but smaller platform. So born from the need from Terriers were born to become mid-range SAM surface-to-air missiles. They could travel up to Mach 3, and they had a range of 40 miles. It had 7 modifications in total throughout its service history. And like the Talos, it was nuclear capable, right? And they used a W-30 warhead and ended its service with a W-45 warhead. Like the Talos as well, they were 2-stage missiles. So they had a booster configuration like the Talos. The booster would launch and then fall away, and the ramjet would take over. They used the Mark 10 twin-arm launcher with at least 40 reloads and that tilting arm that I was mentioning to move missiles from the stowage to the launcher. So they're horizontal, they raise on an elevator, they go into the arm, and the tilting arm then can connect right with the launcher. As I've also mentioned in that photograph, the Boston and Canberra used the vertical stowage because they had a little more space. These were produced by Convair in San Diego. And the original production had the missile controlled by fins on the forward end of the missile, but they went to the fixed strake system and tail fin for speed and stability. Like the Talos, the Terrier had to have guys manually put on the fins. So that was a downside to the Terrier and Talos system. As a smattering example, we have the heavy cruisers, Boston, Canberra, the ships of the Farragut class, all right, the Providence class, CLG 6, 7, and 8, all right, Providence, Springfield, and Topeka, ships of the Leahy class cruisers, and the Belknap class cruisers as well. So here are 3 images of our sister ships. All right, we have the Springfield in the upper right. You have the Topeka in the lower right. And then the large one on the left is the USS Providence with her Terrier on the fantail. All right, you have the Farragut class that's actually launching a Terrier in the upper right, and the lower right and the larger one on the left are both ships of the Leahy class cruisers. So for the Tartar, This was the last missile of the Bumblebee program. This was for close range acquisition, only up to 10 miles and about 65,000 feet ceiling. Ultimately, this was very similar to the Terrier, but without the booster. All right, so it had solid rocket fuel propulsion built right into the missile. All right, which made it quicker for stowage and holding, and then for launching. It also had 3 different launching platforms. It had the twin launcher Mark 11, and it also had the Mark 13 and 22 single arm or one arm Bandit system of launchers. The major difference as well, along with the lack of booster or the 2-stage, was the weapon that was on board, which was a continuous rod warhead. All right, she was produced by General Dynamics and Convair together. And so she was not nuclear capable, but instead carried this 130-pound continuous rod warhead, which as the missile's exploding, these rods come out in a concentric circle or a circular pattern. And as it gets farther away from the detonation, it goes out farther and farther, and you're hoping that it actually hits the target, and it would hit in multiple places, on the actual structure. So this was used quite a bit. It's kind of convoluted, all right? So I tried my best here. Albany-class cruisers as well, the Misher-class destroyers, but it seems as though it really was only the Misher itself. The Kidd-class destroyers, all right? These were the ones that were going to go to Iran. So they're also kind of known as the Dead Admiral or the Ayatollah class, because they were going to go to the Shah of Iran, and then the Iranian Revolution happened. 4 Forrest Sherman class DGs, the 4 that were converted from DD to DDGs, and a bunch of foreign navies, Japan, Italy. You see that over there, down there in the bottom. And here's an example. Unfortunately, I don't know the ships that these are on, but you can see, seems as though on the right we have the twin launcher, and then we have the single arm launcher on the left. So, of course, when you have changes, you usually after a conflict, military budgets decrease. So they had to make do and develop what they could with the technology that they had. All right. They also had technology just old enough to continue concurrent development versus what's called spiral development. All right. Spiral development was used over the course of the standard missile, which makes it much more reliable and standard. All right, so concurrent development is where you're building systems one after another from scratch. Spiral development is where you build upon a platform and develop it and update it with the technology of the time. So you're not starting from scratch. You're not starting with launchers. You're not starting with new ships. All of that is already built into the system for spiral. And also changes in fin technology and therefore stowage options and rate of fire increases. All right, if you don't have guys on the back there putting on the tail fins or the wings, that cuts down on rate of fire. So again, they are all superseded by the 66 and 67 standard missile. So some of the sources I used here, of course, the Okie Boat, Oklahoma City, the Little Rock Association website, the U.S. Naval Institute had a few good articles on this about the 3T program, and then Defense Media Network had a couple nice articles, and then I found some gunner mates, manuals and training manuals on board in our collections. So use those, especially in the 1970s. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this look at the 3 Ts, Terrier, Talos, Tartar. All right. Of course, thank you for your support. Hope you've been enjoying. We're over the hump now in 29 and 29, and we have a lot of more good programming coming your way for the rest of the month. Thanks so much for your support, and we will see you again soon, like tomorrow.